In 1984, a father and son are haggling with a weapons dealer to purchase Kalashnikov rifles at a lower price. Richard Wersch Sr. outsmarts the dealer by threatening to report him for selling a rifle to a 14-year-old boy, risking his license. The Wersch family lives in Detroit, a city in decline, but Richard has no plans to leave. He dreams of starting a chain of video rental stores and making a lot of money. One day, Richard notices a car belonging to a black drug dealer outside his house. The newly bought Kalashnikov will come in handy to threaten his daughter's boyfriend. Dawn is already high. Her father orders her to get ready. They are going to a cafe for ice cream. But Dawn is more interested in hanging out with Tyrone. She runs after his car wearing only her underwear. At that moment, her grandparents arrive and get involved in the family argument. In the basement, Richard has made silencers for the Kalashnikovs he bought. The next morning, Dawn wakes her brother to tell him she's leaving. She's moving in with Tyrone because, in her view, living under the same roof as their father is unbearable. White families live in Detroit's suburbs, while the city's center is populated by poor African Americans. Richard Jr. is an oddity here. He goes to a gang's hideout and offers to sell them Kalashnikovs along with the silencers, which actually significantly increase the price of the weapons. The gang leader is shocked by Richard's audacity, just walking in and risking his white skin. He invites Ricky to come to the rink that evening, making him the only white guy among the black gang members. Ricky is infatuated with the girlfriend of Johnny Curry, a local crime boss, and the niece of Detroit's mayor. Her bodyguards are moonlighting police officers. The corruption is pervasive. One morning, FBI agents raid the Wersch household, accusing Richard of illegally manufacturing, possessing, and selling firearms, specifically the silencers. They want Richard to reveal his buyers, but he refuses. Agent Snyder then calls Ricky over and shows him photos of gangsters, but Ricky only points out those who are already dead. He refuses to betray Johnny Curry. Ricky spends time with his friends shooting rats with a handgun, one of which splatters blood on them. The feds see potential leverage in Ricky, and one evening invite him into a car where Detective Jackson from the Narcotics Division is waiting. The streets are overrun with crack dealers, and Ricky has witnessed firsthand what its use has done to his sister. Despite this, Ricky is unmoved by their warnings. They then show him a photo of a dead body with 2 bullet wounds to the head, fired from a gun his father had bought at a gun show. The implication is clear. Richard Sr.'s fate is in Ricky's hands. Ricky agrees to cooperate. The agents take him to a drug-dealing spot to make a purchase. After completing the task, Ricky goes home with a large duck he found in the trash. For his efforts, he earns $300. Johnny Curry, preparing to marry the mayor's niece, buys suits for his brothers and also for Ricky, as he is the best friend of one of them. The wedding celebration is held at the mayor's mansion. Ricky appears to be the only white guest until he notices a man Johnny is conversing with, Art Derrick, a major drug supplier. Wandering through the mansion, Ricky dreams of one day becoming wealthy. After the banquet, the young crowd went for a drive around the city. Ricky spotted Brenda and asked her out. She thought he was dead, as people who stop showing up at school are often either killed or imprisoned. Ricky made his move on Brenda, and she gave in to him right there in the parking lot. Jackson then assigns Ricky a new task, selling drugs on the street. Ricky isn't thrilled about the idea, but he gets to keep all the profits, a substantial $4,000. Unable to resist, Ricky agrees and soon becomes well known among the dealers. His shoebox of money fills up quickly. By 1985, Richard Sr. continues his gun trading business. One day, he sees Ricky in a car with some cops. Alarmed, Richard searches his son's room and finds a box containing $10,000. Richard confronts Ricky, furious that he made a deal with the police, despite Ricky's intention to protect him. That night, Ricky grabs a duck and drives to a cafe in his grandfather's car, intending to give it to his sister as a gift. Dawn looks worse than before. Ricky urges her to come home and leave Tyrone, who he believes is destroying her. Ricky forgets his keys in the car, and it gets stolen. The family runs outside and shoots at the thief with shotguns, but the thief escapes. However, they are immediately arrested for weapon possession, driving without a license, and attempted murder. The FBI promises to get Ricky out of legal trouble. Grandpa is angry at Ricky for losing the car. Ricky heads to Johnny's garage. The gangsters interrogate him about what he told the cops, suspicious of his quick release. Johnny also warns Ricky to stop dealing on his turf. If Ricky is caught with even a gram, he is to stay away from Johnny and his associates. Leon Lucas owes Johnny a significant amount of money, but he manages to get an extension by inviting Johnny to a boxing match in Las Vegas. This trip introduces Ricky to a truly luxurious lifestyle. He finds it hard not to stare at Johnny's wife, Kathy, who he finds attractive at first sight. However, when they arrive for the fight, Johnny discovers that no VIP seats were reserved for them, and all the tickets are sold out. As a result, the gangsters have to watch the match on TV in a bar. Afterward, Johnny attends a party hosted by Art Derrick. There, a gangster who saw them being denied entry mocks Johnny. Johnny doesn't tolerate the insult and nearly beats the man to death with a champagne bottle. Johnny harbors a grudge against Leon Lucas for this humiliation and sends 2 hitmen to Leon's house. They open fire on the house while Leon's 2 young sons are inside. One of the boys doesn't survive. The shooting involves modified AK-47s. Ricky returns home to his father. Richard mocks his son for wearing a large gold Star of David around his neck despite not being Jewish. Richard urges Ricky to go back to school, warning him that he is getting in too deep and will soon be unable to escape. A bribed policeman informs Johnny that the feds have a new informant, prompting him to scrutinize his own people. Johnny knows that the child's murder won't be overlooked and someone will have to take the fall. He says it should be someone outside their gang, ensuring it's another black individual who isn't part of their crew. Everyone in the neighborhood is on edge. Ricky now avoids contact with the feds and is staying with his grandparents. Richard decides to get rid of all the Kalashnikovs he has just in case. Ricky tells his father that he plans to return to school. He goes inside to check on his father's fish. A henchman of Johnny Curry stops by, apologizes, then shoots Ricky in the stomach. Ricky is taken to the hospital under a false name, where doctors fight to save his life. Richard blames the feds for everything and vows to take revenge on Johnny. He waits for Johnny outside his garage but backs down when Johnny arrives with too many people. Agent Snyder visits Ricky in the hospital, trying to find out who shot him. Ricky doesn't confess, but they already know who is behind the attempt. They have also busted one of the drug spots, and the dealers have ratted out Johnny. SWAT raids Johnny's house, arresting him and other gang members. Ricky is discharged from the hospital. He hopes to see his sister at home since Tyrone has already left her, but she is still missing. Ricky wonders how he will manage school with a catheter, but he won't be allowed back due to being a threat to other students. In 1986, Ricky still hasn't fully recovered. A 10-year-old kid confronts him, claiming Ricky got his sister pregnant and needs to take responsibility. Ricky goes to see Brenda to meet his 1.5-month-old daughter. As he holds the baby, Richard walks in. The grandfather is more excited about the child than his son is. Richard hadn't planned on having either Dawn or Ricky, but he thinks things turned out great. Ricky, however, disagrees, pointing out that Dawn is a drug addict and he has to urinate in bags. Richard doesn't want to hear it. Unlike his father, Ricky is not an optimist. Ricky subtly suggests to his father that they should switch from selling guns to dealing drugs, believing it would bring them wealth faster and improve their lives. However, Richard refuses, sticking to his principles, unwilling to poison the streets. While lost in thought, Richard nearly crashes their car. Despite his father's reluctance, Ricky persists, arguing that Dawn hasn't returned because they live in poverty, and now, as a father himself, he needs money too. Eventually, Ricky strikes a deal with Art Derrick for drug supplies. With Johnny behind bars, Ricky inherits a broad customer base. One night, he and his father venture into a drug den to retrieve Dawn. Richard grabs his resisting daughter, who eventually surrenders but needs to endure withdrawal. Richard isolates her in a room. As Ricky's wealth grows, he lavishes Brenda with food and gifts, establishing himself as a formidable figure in the neighborhood at just 16. Kathy, now without a husband, and Ricky start sharing glances. Richard strives to aid Dawn's recovery, seeing both his children under one roof as a source of happiness. He implores Ricky not to succumb to greed, as it could destroy everything they built, but his warning comes too late. In the morning, a police squad stormed into the house, arresting both the father and the son. Jackson berated the boy, calling him a complete idiot if he genuinely believed he wouldn't get caught. Newspapers dubbed Ricky the cocaine baron after discovering 8 kilograms of the substance in his room. Richard protests, blaming the federal agents for forcing his son to sell drugs on the streets. But who would believe that a 15-year-old kid was working for the FBI? Relatives met with FBI agents in a motel, but the agents refused to admit to coercing the boy into dealing drugs. They claimed he did it willingly and got caught on his own. Now facing a life sentence, Ricky could be freed if he helps infiltrate the organization as a mole. The feds aim to get to the mayor through his niece, Kathy, with whom Ricky has grown close. Richard persuaded his son to agree. He requested a written agreement, but the agents declined, asking for trust instead. Ricky approached Kathy and asked the mayor's people to assist in escorting a large shipment of drugs. The operation led to the arrest of 11 police officers and the mayor's close friends. Television reports explicitly stated that Ricky Versh's assistance enabled the operation. Richard reassures his relatives, saying they've made a deal with the feds and they'll keep quiet. Ricky's trial came to an end. The jury delivered their verdict. Richard Verse Jr. was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Grandpa is outraged. The boy is only 17 and they've taken his life away. Ricky was escorted to his new home. He's allowed an hour of solitary exercise a day, the rest of the time confined to his cell. Richard waited for Agent Snyder outside the management building, but she avoids him. She claims they never promised anything. The Bureau requested a lighter sentence, but the court didn't comply, and that's the end of it. Richard found another agent who explains they couldn't arrest the mayor at the time, so they went after smaller fish, who turned out to be his son. Don arrives with his daughter. Grandpa fell ill after the trial. He might not recover. Tearfully, Ricky asks his sister to show his daughter his photos more often. Richard takes the phone, trying to reassure his son, saying he's been in touch with agents and maybe Ricky will be out in about 6 years. But Ricky is despairing. It's not a life, it's death. Richard believed his son's life would be better than his own, but he's the one who ruined it. He asks for forgiveness, insisting the family will always support him, but Ricky just hangs up.